Hello and welcome to the Rays of Hope program. I'm your host for today, Mary Foley, and at our last program we spoke with some very special guests, family members of a victim of sexual abuse, and due to the nature and content of that program we felt like it deserved more time, and so Tiffany and Jeff, thank you for being gracious to go another program with us so that we can get a better sense of what your journey has been like and what parents need to know. So thank you for joining us.
Proud to be here.
Tiffany, we had talked in the last program that we did on this topic, and Jeff, about your journey. Just quickly summarize your story, what brings you here today, and then we'll move on with the rest of the content of the show. Why did you come to the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center?
To find help for our daughter who had been abused in a relationship of authority. And we didn't have anywhere else to turn. We needed somewhere that we felt that she would be safe, and that she could get the help that she needed, and that we needed to understand what had happened
so
to our family.
Your daughter had been victimized in a sexual abuse situation with a teacher.
With a teacher, yes.
At her school.
Right.
And so we talked about the different emotions and things that you all went through as you discovered that story. And I think one of the last things that you said was, we as a society have become relaxed. When we feel that icky feeling or when we see something doesn't seem right, we veer on the side of, surely that's not it, and not on the side of this very well may be what's going on. And so I'd like to focus this program on that sort of information. What was it like, do you feel like, for your daughter as you learned how she was manipulated? What would you say to people who may say, I think your daughter's lying, I don't think this happened, and how have you navigated that?
Well, those were some of the same things we ask ourselves, because I think the first thing you want to do is say, oh, no, this is not happening, you know, somebody's blowing this all out of proportion, you know, for some reason somebody doesn't like our daughter and they're making this up about her and she's mad about something, so she said. We did the exact same thing, but when you look, you know your child. As parents, you know your child. And we have to get past the point of, oh, no, this couldn't happen, to really look at it. I mean, you have to really look at it, and you have to be very, very careful with jumping to assumptions and making your mind up immediately. I think we immediately, when you hear a situation of a teacher and a student, you immediately say, oh, well, they had a relationship, you know. That's what, and it's not that way. I mean, you have to break it down to, this teacher used my daughter's emotions to control her every action, her decision-making process, the relationship she had with other students, with her peer group, even with her parents. You know, and you want to say, well, she's a teenager, all teenagers go through that, where they're trying to spread their wings and they're trying to find themselves. And this was different.
And how was it different?
It was like a switch had been flipped on this child. She was different. She was defiant is too harsh of a word, but it was just a feeling of
separation. Maybe
it was a separation feeling. She didn't want to be around her parents and her family as much. She had a certain peer group that she was with, and she had always been a very outgoing and had never ran with a certain crowd of people, and you found her to be with just a certain group of people, you know, and we found through the whole process, you know, hindsight is, you know, that's what it is. It's hindsight. But if we can use that to help other parents, to where, you know, our daughter, she didn't date anyone for a 2-year span of time. If she had a crush on somebody and she liked them and they went to a dance, then, you know, 2 or 3 days later, be like, no, I don't like him anymore.
And so it came to your attention that this teacher was directly influencing who she could be with and who she couldn't be with, and he was telling her.
The peer group became the teacher's peer group. we found out later, every single one of the kids that our daughter we watched certain kids fall away, who she had been friends with. We found out later that this group that came to be her absolute closest friends, all of them knew about it. All of them. And basically it came down to where that was the only kids that she hung out with anymore. Some of them were even enablers. One of them was the one who would deliver our daughter to the teacher. Looking back, it's easy to see now. We saw it as, in the same way many parents do, you've got your best friends. And kids, you know, many kids, they have a best friend in 7th grade and they don't even hardly know that kid in 11th grade. And that's natural. But in our situation, it happened all of a sudden. And I don't think we saw it as much as we missed some of those kids. But we just saw it as you move on. When you go to high school, you're not friends all the time.
And you don't want to be one of those overreactive parents. I never wanted to be one of those parents who was suspicious of every little thing. You know, it was like, you know, I'm not going to be one of those parents that you see all the time that you hate to see them coming. Oh, here she comes. She's going to be complaining about, you know, they're going to complain because she got a bad grade on this test and it wasn't that child's fault, and it wasn't that way. So and we found out, you know, and we found out later after the fact that our daughter had a steady boyfriend in last summer, and they were together all the time, had a good time. He was always at our house. We enjoyed having him there. And when school started, about 2 weeks after school started, it just completely changed. He would pick her up and take her to school. He would pick her up from practice, from color guard practice. He would go up and watch practice, and then all of a sudden she came in one day and she goes, you know, he's just hanging around too much. I don't need him hanging around so much, and I don't want him picking me up from practice. That's just silly. I live so close. I'll just ride home with one of the other kids, and you know, and if I'm just with him all the time, that's just too much. I need to be with other people.
And so on the one hand, as a parent, you're probably thinking,
yay, we're not going to have this.
Right.
But on the other hand, you found out that the teacher was putting pressure on her.
Yes, he told her. The teacher told her, said, you know, the boyfriend, he's not to pick you up from school. He's not to come up on this band field. He would tell her, this hurts my feelings that you bring this boy up here. You know how I am when you're with other people. Well, one of the terms you used was, it freaks me out. It freaks me out to see you with other people. So she had been put in a position of pleasing him, and so she did exactly what he said. She turned the boyfriend away. She completely just shut him out. And we didn't understand it. We questioned her, and you know, she'd say, "Oh, Mom, you know, I just don't want a serious relationship." Well, you love to hear that because you don't want a 16-year-old in a serious relationship. But she was manipulated. We found text messages
and she
where
went
he said,
to that same core group we talked about a minute ago, all of whom were band students, but that was only because it has nothing to do with the band. It was just that was the group.
And he fed on a teenager, especially a female teenager's emotions of, it's every girl's fairy tale to have someone fall in love with her and think that she is just all that, and our daughter said, you know, I was like, Blair, you have never had the problem of being shy or not, you know, being social and not having friends. But she said, Mom, when I would walk into the room, he would stop whatever he's doing and pay attention to just me.
And so I think it's important at this point to note that that is a normal reaction from a child to want attention from someone in authority, to be approved of. At time of adolescence is characterized by those sorts of things. And so we had talked in the previous program for viewers that are just now joining us for the first time that as a result of this case and similar cases that the law has now been changed. It was effective July 1 of this year that anybody that is in a position of authority and special trust cannot have a relationship with anyone under the age of 18. And some of the discussion and the background with that is the very fact that that is coercive in and of itself. That if you have authority over someone, you have an unspoken power.
Yes.
Sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken, to pressure them and to get them to do what you want because you wield some sort of authority over them. And kids come with their defenses down. They're coming to school. School's safe. You can trust your teachers. We tell them that from kindergarten
Right. We
up.
do.
And so then when this sort of thing happens, even though we as adults in society have told them all along you can trust your teachers, then all of a sudden some members of society may say, wait a minute, she was old enough, or
Sure.
it really wasn't that way. And what are some of the responses that you have heard from members of the community?
Some of the responses have been shocking, I guess would be a good word. Devastating, be a good word. We've seen people who feel that that the
Well-
sentence that he got was way too much for what he did.
Well, and we've had the reaction, and it was not said in a hurtful,
Sure.
spiteful way. We have had responses of, well, it could have been worse. It was just sex. You know, Tiffany, it was just sex. It could have been worse. She could have been on drugs. You know, he could have killed her, and you know, it was just sex. But it's not, and I can't explain to you. I can't give you the words for why that's like, no, it's not just sex. We had the response before the actual arrest came out, when we had first made our initial inquiries into the school, wanting them to help us. You know, we got the reaction, well, she's not the first one, she won't be the last one. And it was that casual, and it was like, what do you mean? She's not the first one, she won't be the last one, so that's okay? You know, that it was almost like, no big deal. And I think some people thought that, well, your daughter knew what she was doing. Why are you crying now? Because, you know, why is this teacher going to have to suffer? Because your daughter was in a consensual relationship.
And what would you say to that
I would
response?
say that consensual is a very, it's very vague in this situation, because you can manipulate someone into doing what you want them to do.
By nature
It's
of that position.
by nature of that position. He used her emotions, her wanting to fit in, her wanting to excel for that teacher, to be the best, you know, band member or color guard member that she could be. And he used those to manipulate her decision making.
And Jeff, you said that there's been some concern about, or some of the responses have been centered around what it
Him.
cost him.
Sure.
What has it cost you and your family?
The cost to our daughter is, and probably the worst thing about this is, we're really unsure exactly what the cost is to our daughter. We can see what's happened to her now. Everything about her is different. We have a different child now than we had a year ago. But the immediate cost was all of her friends who she had gone to school with for 10 years were gone. We purchased a dream home to where when you pull out of our driveway, you see the school that she went to. And she now drives 250 miles a week to go to school. And we live, I could throw a rock from the end of our road and hit the high school. And that's devastating, because we planned the next few years of our life around living right here where, you know, the day she turned 16 and got her driver's license, instead of us letting her start driving around the community, we had to put her in a car and send her 50 miles to school. And it was horrifying for us.
Well, and you think of high school as being the one time in a teenager's life, male or female, where really and truly, the kids don't think it this way, but they don't have life stresses. They don't have the responsibility of a job and paying rent and making sure they perform well at a job. This is supposed to be a very molding time for them, where they build memories, they build relationships, they learn how to deal with society, how to be part of a group, be part of a team, and then it just gets ripped right out from underneath you. You're taken away from your peer group. You're taken away from adults that taken the perpetrator out of the way that you respected, you completely have to start over. That's hard for an adult. You know, I always hated, you know, job interviews and the first day of a new job, and just think this child has had a horrible thing happen to her. It's people making fun of her. They are talking about her. Some of them having sympathy, and then you have to send her to a group of strangers, to a new school.
And you mentioned very eloquently the things that we learn at this age, and the lessons that we learn, and the things that we should be learning, and the things that we shouldn't have to worry about. But in all of this, your family, and specifically your daughter, has had to have a very difficult lesson that sometimes justice doesn't come in the package that you wish that it would.
That's right.
Can you talk to me about the sentencing day? What was that like for your family?
We, and I'm sure just as any victim of any crime, we looked to the sentencing day as the day we finally get what we want. And our sentencing day wound up being quite possibly the second most devastating thing behind the actual finding out what happened. We were as devastated at the sentencing because, number one, we found out how much community support jumped in behind this guy.
But well, when you say community support, you have to look at it too. He manipulated the community too. I mean,
But
he
those-
reached out and got these parents to support him. Oh, he doesn't need to go to jail because he's lost his house, and he's going to be on a sex offenders list, and he and his wife has suffered.
But that was a difficult thing to see.
It was a difficult thing
for you
to
as a family.
see,
So let's be clear.
But it was effective. It was effective.
So let's be
for
clear to the
him.
viewer. He was originally charged with felony counts.
Yes.
And there was a plea agreement reached. Some of those charges were lessened. And so you came to the sentencing expecting some sort of validation and justice. And so that's not what you found.
What we wanted more than anything out of all this was for him to be on a sex offenders list, which would allow other people to know what he had done, and to make sure he never taught again. And we did get both of those.
Okay.
But however, we felt like that he needed to get some time in jail just to show how serious the law was about this crime. And what we found was,
and we were told before we went, we didn't have any false hopes of they were going to put him in jail. We had already primed ourselves that, look, first time offender, he's probably not going to get any jail time.
Okay.
That's hard to swallow. That's hard to swallow.
So what you found when you got there was you were primed.
We were primed not to
what,
get that.
But what
the
did
attitude. It was the attitude. It was the whole attitude.
and part of it
courtroom.
was quite simply the attitude of the judge in this case. The judge looked at us and said, try not to hate. Try not to let this anger overtake you, but at the same time, I'm going to let this man completely off with probation and community service. But then, there was an attitude that we got from the judge was like, I just don't see this as seriously as you see this.
And he said, he goes, I don't see this man as a threat. And he told us that I think this man has enough integrity not to do this again. He's intelligent, and you just want to say, well, that's why you're so good at it. And it was almost like, and the one thing I think that hurt more than anything was when they said, I don't see by putting this man in jail that it will deter anyone else from doing this. We all know teachers are not supposed to have sex with students. What do you say? I mean, what do you say to that? And what do you say to that child who is sitting there and listening to that? What do you think that does to that child?
What did you say?
Why?
What do you say to that?
Well, that devastated that child.
But what do you say to that response? Because the judge said that, so one could make a logical conclusion that many people may say that. So I'm asking you as parents, you've heard the argument. It's not very serious. It's not going to deter anyone else. And so you've asked the question, what does that say? I'm asking you, what did it say, and what do you say?
What it said to us was that we, as a lot of people, I don't want to give this to all society, but many people in society, And what it said to me was, we realize that kids are not the same as they used to be, and they're a little more dangerous nowadays. And it kept, to me, it turned to where, well, the kids of today.
So the kids became the problem,
The
and not
kids
the
become
perpetrator.
the problem and not him. The kids, they dress too sexy. They talk different. They're more open. Girls have changed. And so somehow or another you turn it to the children and away from the molester, the perpetrator.
Or the perpetrator uses, I mean, in this case, the perpetrator he was depressed. He had lost a baby, and he was depressed, and he didn't know what to do. And it's like, well, a normal person doesn't turn to a teenager to get over their depression. I mean, it's accountability. We're not going to take it wasn't my fault. Something happened to me that made me do this.
So if
I wouldn't have done this.
If you could go back, which I know you can't, but if you could go back to that courtroom, and you could draft what you wish the judge would have said, or what you wish community members would have said, because there are community members watching this program, what would you draft for them?
If I could go back and tell him what I wanted him to say, or what I would have him say, if he chose not to give this man jail time, then I think he should have went out of his way to make a statement of just how disgusted he was by this situation. Just, if he wanted to simply say, I choose to have mercy,
But
mercy,
we're going
mercy
to make
does
sure.
not mercy does not alleviate punishment. He should have, instead of somehow wanting to talk to us as parents and tell us not to be angry, I would have him be angry. I would have had him to say to this man how deplorable what you did was, how much harm you've done. I hope you go home and realize that not only was this child hurt, you have damaged countless people. You need to be able to live with that at night. And instead, he simply, to credit this man with having integrity, was to me a blow that I simply could not take.
And he didn't abuse just our child. He abused every child that he's ever had as a student, in the fact that he was set to be an example for them. He was set to help mold them and to teach them, and he completely destroyed their trust in him, their trust in a student-teacher relationship. He ruined their band experience. He ruined their experiences at school, because this just didn't touch our family. It touched every family involved in that organization and in the community. And we should be intolerable of indifference. I think that's why we're in the shape we're in. It's because it's like, well, it didn't happen to me, so I don't have to get involved with that. I feel sorry for them that they're going through it, but we don't know all the circumstances, so there's more to it. But it's just this indifference.
So
we should be outraged that we don't want these people to spend time in jail.
So you wish the judge would have shown some outrage.
Outrage
and
would have helped.
And we understand that the law and how laws are written,
Sure.
that you may not be able to put everyone in jail, but you can set an example of that person, that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're not in this courtroom again.
And so
Under
that's
these same situations, because with indifference, we're going to get to the situation, we're going to allow this man the opportunity to do this again, because you'll never convince me that this was an isolated case and that he fell for our daughter and that he was in love with her.
And most of the time, the average statistic is that a perpetrator will commit over 300 offenses before they're caught. So it sounds like a good take-home message for our viewers, just as members of society, is to not be indifferent, to check, to explore, to investigate, to not be so quick to take a side, but to offer support to those that have been victimized, is what I hear you all
Yeah,
say.
Yes,
because this child, we don't know how she will develop with relationships.
And hopefully with the right intervention.
With the right intervention, she can.
We are almost out of time. So what how I would like to close the program today is to ask you both. We often hope for that moment of justice. We hope for that moment of validation that you were looking for in the courtroom or in your circles of friends and people that you hang around with. What do you plan to do, Jeff, Tiffany, for parents that are watching? Maybe they didn't have their day in court just like you didn't. Sadly enough, sometimes that happens. Where are you going? What would you say to them about how to move forward?
Being people of faith as we are, our comfort is to try to believe what we know is true. There's a difference between something being true and you being able to believe it. We try to believe that there can be something good come out of the worst of situations. It has changed us for the good in one way, and that is that we have both decided anytime the opportunity comes, whatever form, fashion, whatever it is, to speak to a television show, to speak to a group, to speak to kids, to support another family that's going through it, we will do it. And in that way, we hope that can be the positive, that there is something that we can do for the next couple that will make this situation a little more tolerable for them. And we hope we can do that. However way that the Lord leads us to, that's fine.
Well, and I will never give this perpetrator the satisfaction of thinking that he got away with what he did.
No.
And that he broke this family. He broke the spirit, but he didn't break this family, and he's
We will not break.
Going to keep us from trying to prevent this from happening to someone else.
And on that note, both said it so beautifully. We are out of time. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us and your story with us. I know it was beneficial to all who watched. And thank you for giving us your time to join us for the Rays of Hope program. We hope that you will join us each and every time as we teach you and help you, and as we learn from each other how to prevent this crime and how to be active members of the solution. Thank you.